Story 1. Neither. I have a freeze reaction caused by a panic disorder that triggers that reflex, and the only external sign is that I go very quiet and still. It has made masking a lot easier, for better or worse. Story 2. Do you know the goats that get stiff and fall when they are shocked? Story 3. Flight, but with a note in my head. Avoiding chaos gave me a calm life, but as I get older I realize that some fights are more costly to avoid than to face. Story 4. Anxiety makes me freeze. I do not attempt or achieve the ideas I have in my head and instead just get by. Conflict makes me fight. When I was younger, I got into quite a few confrontations. Story 5. I usually freeze. Whenever my sister hurt me, I would just take it. It sucks, but I don't know what else to do. Story 6. Fight. I've always been one of the tallest and therefore biggest people in my social circle, and that has meant I sometimes have to protect my smaller friends. Now it's almost instinctive to protect myself and those around me, using force only until the threat is gone and no further. I don't like violence, but sometimes there is no real choice. Story 7. Mostly flight. I step back first, think, then act. It saved me from a lot of unnecessary trouble and taught me to choose my battles. Story 8. I freeze. For example, if a car is coming toward me, I'm worried that if I run I will move into the path the car will swerve into to avoid me, and it will hit me anyway. So I just stand there. Story 9. I am a petite, non-confrontational woman. On a night out, a man pulled a knife and threatened to stab my husband, who is 6 feet 4 inches. Before I registered what I was doing, I put myself between the man with the knife and my husband. In my head, the attacker would not stab me, and if he did, I would rather it be me than my husband. Fortunately, no one was stabbed and the situation was defused. Because of my job, I am not fazed by high-stress encounters and people frequently pick fights with me. My fight response helps because I do not back down. I remain calm and commanding. I think of solutions instantly instead of panicking, although they are not always good ones, as demonstrated above. Story 10. The body says fly, the brain says fight. Then again, sometimes the script flips and the body says fight while the brain says fly. It is a constant battle between feeling unsafe in safe environments and determining when it is the opposite. The beauty of complex post-traumatic stress disorder. Story 11. If it were only a choice between fight and flight, it would be 50-50 depending on the situation. However, there are two other options, freeze and fawn. For me, it is 50% freeze, 40% fawn, 5% fight, and 5% flight. Story 12. I hate flying. I have always wished I could fight, but I am very non-confrontational. Story 13. It's always been about fighting. I hate the moments leading up to violence or a verbal argument. But the moment it flips from socially awkward to a rumble, I suddenly feel calmer. The situation goes from a million scary possibilities to a single, simpler certainty. I can usually act decisively to defend myself, escalate or de-escalate as needed. Sometimes a day or so later I feel it. For a while, I used that in a corporate job with a lot of intense arguing. My coworkers said seeing me get yelled at was like watching a stone hit a pool and leave no ripples, because I kept my cool longer than others. That did not last more than a few years. Living with that stress began to wear me out and affect my health, and I began to struggle with conflict. I do more relaxed work now. I grew up in a fairly chaotic household, and school was rough. Apparently, it is an unhealthy coping mechanism. Fortunately, I am old enough and live somewhere safe enough that physical violence from being out drinking or being mugged is no longer a danger to me. Story 14. Every time I have been sexually assaulted, it has been a version of freeze. My brain does its best to help me survive. It would have been nice to shove a hand away from my pants and leave, or to walk away from someone who was effectively having sex with me on the dance floor when I was out with so-called friends. I was coerced into sex while making out with someone, which led to a tumultuous on and off relationship for years. I have survived and shared my stories to educate, but it would have been nice if my brain had gone toward flight. Story 15. In aggressive social situations with men, I fawn. I become non-threatening and do not recognize the behavior as aberrant or concerning. I act as if I do not understand the situation and remain unperturbed. It is not a great strategy, but it is instinctive, and I believe it has saved me a few times. Like playing dead socially, it forces others to explain themselves or to consider how their actions are perceived, which often undermines their intent. Story 16. In conflicts, I grew up with a narcissistic father who had anger issues and later endured an extremely abusive relationship. I had many breaking points in both. In physical confrontations, I am less aggressive and more in a defensive mode, especially since I can escape grabs by twisting my limbs or pulling back suddenly. Story 17. I am more of a flight person. It has shaped my life, leading me to avoid conflict. Story 18. Flight disguised as strategy. I have spent my life calling retreat knowing when to pivot, and it has made me excellent at exit plans but terrible at standing my ground when it matters. Story 19. I was in martial arts and hockey as a kid, then decided playing music was less dangerous. I played well over 1,000 gigs. Some were more important than others. We were often in the worst places at the worst times. I have defused many nearly violent encounters, typically verbally, sometimes with rear-naked chokes. I always have the instinct to remain calm, not to fight or flee. Stand back and assess by all means and avoid getting harmed, but stop the bad behavior when you get the chance. You will feel better for it. Story 20. I used to fawn or freeze, but I kind of permanently lost my temper and now I want to fight everybody, especially God. Story 21. I used to always choose to fight. But now that I'm a single mom to a little one, I lean toward avoiding confrontation to protect them. However, I am still willing to accept consequences for them. Story 22. It depends on the threat, but I am more inclined to fight, meaning I will take action. I do not actually fight unless I have no other choice, but I stand my ground and prepare. Story 23. Flight. I am alive. I have never been imprisoned. I am married. I am employed. I have never broken a bone. Happy days. Story 24. How do you grow up in a family that hits you and not try to placate them? I become very clingy when people are angry, trying to calm them down. It usually doesn't help, but I try. Story 25. I used to fight, but I'm very sick and weak now, so I don't know. It depends on the situation. Story 26. I am a fighter. I attribute that to standing up for my mother when I was a child. My father struggled with alcoholism. He has not consumed alcohol for years and is a good man now. Story 27. If it is directed at me, I flee. I am not strong or very coordinated, but I have long legs and can run fast. If it is not a physical threat, I still avoid it. If it is directed at someone or something I love and care about, I fight all the way. Story 28. Depends, but I have a strong fawn response due to childhood trauma. Story 29. I do not understand why we say fight or flight and not fight, flight, or freeze, since freeze is clearly just as common. Story 30. Fight. I am 6 feet 5 inches tall and 210 pounds, and I have been athletic my whole life. When I recently turned 40, I met my match. My boxing partner got extremely drunk at a party and humbled me in epic fashion, laughing out loud. Story 31. I have had a fighting instinct since I was a toddler. I developed dissociative identity disorder around age 6. My brother and I were kicked out of daycare for beating up a neighborhood child who had been bullying my brother. I saved my 3-year-old cousin from drowning even though I did not know how to swim. In high school, I saved both my girlfriend and my brother's girlfriend from drowning at the same time. The next year, I saved my girlfriend again when a firework set her hair on fire. I have little to no memory of being in class from 7th grade through my senior year. I spent 6 years in dissociative states during school hours. I took advanced placement classes. I was a multi-sport athlete, homecoming king, and athlete of the year. I graduated with honors and received national and academic awards, and I received athletic scholarship offers. I was accepted to an Ivy League school and appointed to a service academy. In college, I saved a 2-year-old boy from having his hands caught and injured in an escalator. This was a major cause of the end of all my long-term relationships. The longer a relationship lasted and the closer we became, the more my alters perceived my partner as a threat, and the worse my symptoms became. Story 32. Definitely flight. I have been physically disabled since birth, and I would almost certainly be hurt or worse if I tried to fight. I am fairly strong, a manual wheelchair user, but my coordination and dexterity would work against me. Story 33. I run away to fight another day. It's curious how in debates like this there is rarely a third option. Do nothing. Let them attack you. You might think that's a silly option, but the dominant religion of this website's country is Christianity. Jesus commanded his followers in the Sermon on the Mount. You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist the one who is evil. But if anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to him the other also. Few Christians today are pacifists. Almost no Christian attacked in the street would stand there and take it as Jesus commanded. They would fight back or run. Yet the third option remains available, and one would expect people who profess to follow Jesus to use it more often. Story 34. My instincts trend toward fighting hard, and it's a problem. I'm surprised I haven't ended up in prison yet. Growing up, I had an abusive father. He liked to corner me and take out his rage. He'd usually blame something I'd done months earlier that he had just remembered, but it correlated with when he was angry about work. He always made sure I was somewhere with no exits while he stood in the doorway or down a dead-end hallway. I think that's why flight isn't an option in my mind, even when it should be. Things only started to improve when I fought back. I had to give it everything and hurt him badly enough that he'd stop, or it would just get worse for me. I acted like a cornered wild animal. Any object that wasn't nailed down was a weapon. If nothing else was available, I'd gouge his eyes with my thumb or keys. I probably bit him at some point. He went to the hospital a few times. I probably should have gone, but that didn't happen. I have a shin bone that still hurts when it's cold, decades later. As badly as I hurt him, it never seemed to change his behavior. He always did it again. I hadn't talked to him for many years, but he's mellowed these days with a lot of medication, so I suspect it was at least partly due to a mental disorder. That strong fight response has persisted. When I feel physically threatened, I have hurt people badly without meaning to. It just comes out. It's like my brain screams that if I don't go all out, this person will make me cease to exist. I'm not going to go after someone who is just yelling or being rude. I'm usually calm, collected, and good at de-escalating situations before they escalate. But if someone puts their hands on me, I feel panic, lose self-control, and take it too far. That's probably why I'm so good at de-escalating and avoiding confrontation. I never wanted to get to that point. No one wins. It depends on the threat. Some things feel less existential. I've definitely run away from angry animals before, because fighting a goose isn't worth it and it's not going to do much. Story 35. Flight. Fighting is not worth it. I could lose and be maimed or killed, or win and be charged with a crime. Story 36. I rarely get into actual fights, but afterward I always think there is a huge chance that next time I will get killed and that this will be how I die. Once I hit a mugger with my backpack when he was trying to take my bike. He had a gun, and as he ran away he turned and pointed it at me. I thought I was done, but perhaps he decided it was not worth the consequences of killing someone. A couple of years ago, the last time I got into a scuffle, we were only pulling at each other like in judo. Nobody went to the floor, but the next day my back was really messed up, and I had to roll out of bed slowly. I was bullied a lot for my appearance as a child, so I learned at school that it only stops if you stand up for yourself. Sometimes I forget I am not in school anymore and that I can just walk away. Story 37. Flight. I don't run, I disengage. I've learned that most fights don't end in resolution, just exhaustion. Walking away has probably saved me years of unnecessary damage. Story 38. I'm a terrible runner, so I chose to fight almost every time. It wasn't always in my favor, but it gave me a reputation. Don't mess with me unless you're serious. In hindsight, I was lucky that despite how often I got beaten up, nothing serious happened to my health. Story 39. I fight, and only by sheer chance have I avoided a situation where this would have truly hurt me. Story 40. I am more like a turtle, especially under pressure. I tend to dig in and become quietly angry, not openly fighting, but resisting and standing my ground. It can border on passive aggressiveness at times. For instance, when I had a boss a few years ago who was hellbent on finding a reason to fire me, I went into turtle mode, rule lawyering everything I did at work, scrutinizing my actions to see if they could get me in trouble and acting accordingly. The same thing happened with a certain family member who objected to how I live. I am single, and she tended to see that as a failure. I stopped visiting her. I was not actively avoiding her, but I did not seek contact either. If she brought it up at a family gathering, I would bring up her ex-husband in response. It does not make life easier, but at least I feel I can look at myself in the mirror day to day. Regarding physical confrontation, it would depend, I guess. I tend to avoid physical conflict. Words do not hurt nearly as much as accidentally injuring someone or putting them or myself in the hospital or worse. I got into a fight once when we were out with a group and a girl was being beaten up. You would have to be a real coward to ignore that, right? That is the only fight I have ever been in. Story 41. Unfortunately, for me it's both, depending on the day, week, or month. Story 42. Everyone who says they freeze reminds me of Barry from Dinner for Schmucks because I saw it recently. Story 43. Fight when I am protecting someone else. Flight when it is just about me. Story 44. What kind of threat? Physical? How about, say, a colleague spreads a false rumor that could end your academic career? Do you confront him, go to the dean, or quietly look for a new job? Another example. Your 50-year-old husband has fallen for a 26-year-old and refuses to end the relationship. Do you fight to keep him or leave? Story 45. Probably flight. When I feel threatened, my instinct is to pull back, think things through, and get some distance instead of reacting right away. That has helped me stay out of a lot of unnecessary trouble. But it has also meant I have had to work on not avoiding hard conversations or challenges just because they feel uncomfortable at first. Story 46. Flow for me. I get laid off a lot because I never seem panicked, so it seems that I do not care. Story 47. My body's reaction is delayed by about 2 seconds when I think about how I would do something. Story 48. I have never been faced with a threat that triggered a fight or flight reaction. I am analytical and tend to avoid or remove myself from situations that feel unsafe as early as possible to prevent experiencing a direct threat of harm. Story 49. If we are talking about people, avoiding a fight is my first option. If I cannot avoid it, I will deliver the first strike and make it count because it might be the only one I get. If we are talking about an animal that intends to eat me, I will try to make it earn its supper. Story 50. When I was younger, I definitely chose fight. As I've gotten older, I choose flight. I used to be very aggressive and would use my body to enforce my point. I never seriously hurt anyone, but I did physically overpower people in anger. I was 6'4", worked out a lot, and felt like I could do anything. Today I have a wife and children, and I can't justify that behavior anymore. I had already started to calm down before, but it is still a change. I also realize how damaging that whole mindset is. I viewed everyone I thought was weaker as potential victims I could do anything to. That is a really harmful mindset, and I see it often with many influencers on social media. Story 51. Probably. Throughout history, people in extreme situations have done desperate things to survive. For example, Aaron Ralston cut off his own arm with a dull knife when he became trapped in a canyon. He literally sawed through bone to free himself. It is easy to judge from the couch, but when you are actually there, it is a completely different story. Story 52. I had a lot of fights in my younger years. I grew up in a rough area and an abusive household. It might sound strange, but if I know I can win, I will often walk away. If I am at real risk or cannot avoid a confrontation, I will fight. I'm happy to turn my back on someone I know I can beat and walk away. It's more trouble than it's worth. However, taking a passive approach and not defending myself in a situation I cannot avoid is just stupid. Almost every fight I've been in was because someone hurt a friend or I had to defend myself. Revenge and standing up to people who deserve it felt powerful and primal. I am generally more proud of the fights I walked away from, but I have few regrets about the fights I did take. I am extremely competitive and believe in fairness. I get very triggered by situations like a group targeting a smaller, weaker person. I'm not small and I don't look weak. I have called out many people for doing this. I hate fake tough guys and bullies. Story 53. It depends. If I have to fight, I assume it will be to protect my life or my wife's life, so I would want her to run while I act as a distraction. Otherwise, there is no need to fight, and talking people down is usually easy. I do not want to fight or hurt someone unless I absolutely have to. I usually carry a knife, but if a gun is present, it is stupid to fight and I have to run. I know my wife is the freeze type, so I would have to defend her. If I am alone, I hope I can talk my way out of it before it turns violent. Story 54. It depends heavily on the situation. I have learned from training and experience to always de-escalate first. On the rare occasions when there is a confrontation, I usually walk away with everyone involved intact and calmer. Story 55. No one has ever suggested a third response or explained why. That approach always works for me. People think I look threatening because of my size, 6 feet 1 inch and 120 kilograms, but I am a kind-hearted soul. If a situation gets out of hand, it is better to walk away. If a fight is unavoidable, self-defense is the best option these days. I do not want to get into a lawsuit. Honestly, it depends on the situation. Story 56. I mostly fight but assess how much danger I am in and will switch to flight. Freezing can kill you or make you a victim. I have avoided near-death experiences by either leaving immediately or stepping forward to save myself and others, stopping dangerous situations from happening. I stopped my house from being burgled by scaring the intruders off and chasing them on foot. I also saved a friend's dog from an attack recently. I have learned that in most cases, doing something, even if it is not perfect, will change the outcome and is better than doing nothing. Story 57. From personal experience, I go into fight mode when I or others are threatened, but at heart I am a gentle soul who does not like conflict. Story 58. It depends. If it is something I can fight back against, I do. If I cannot, I run away. If it is sexual abuse, I freeze. Story 59. For some reason I default to fight, not even trying to sound tough. I have been in situations where it would have been better to choose flight. Adrenaline is a powerful drug. Story 60. Whenever I had fight or flight moments, my adrenaline would instantly spike from 50 to 1,000 because of post-traumatic stress disorder. Now I constantly feel adrenaline because I became so used to it and I go into fight mode. Story 61. I would say it depends on the threat, but my usual response is to freeze. I hate freezing. I have to fight myself not to freeze, which is infinitely worse than fighting the threat. Story 62. I find it frustrating that my reactions vary almost randomly. In some dangerous situations I respond calmly and admirably and people praise my behavior. In other similar situations I feel fear and nearly panic. There is no discernible pattern for which response will occur. Story 63. Surprisingly, I fight. In everyday life, I act like I'm scared of things, but when faced with potential danger, I lock in. I get mad and I get brave. Not sure why. Oh wait, I know, childhood trauma. Yes, that explains it. Story 64. It always depends on the cost. Fights usually carry the highest risk. Story 65. I've discovered that under threat my tendency is neither fight nor flight. It is freeze. In one example, a big dog ran toward me. I froze in place and did not protect my dog, who was then mauled by the other dog. To this day, I wish I had just picked up my dog. Story 66. Choose flight any day. No highly trained individual would ever choose to fight and risk their life. Even if there appears to be no way out, seeking an opportunity to escape is the only wise option. Story 67. I'm all about de-escalation and leaving instead of fighting. There are rarely good outcomes in a fight, even for the winner. That said, the most important part of fighting is not your ability to fight, but your willingness to engage. Crying, pleading, or running away, behaviors found throughout nature and not just in humans, signal to predators to attack. Humans are predators. You can avoid many fights simply by showing the other person you are willing to fight. Story 68. Flight. I don't know what fight I would have gotten into, but avoiding all confrontation is not positive either. Story 69. Fight. The other day I bumped into a door in the dark, panicked, and punched it with all my might. I panic and punch things. This has gotten me into trouble. It is why I try to leave as fast as possible before I get that stressed. I would rather not make my problem someone else's. At the time I had heard noises at home and thought something was wrong. I was pretty sleepy. The way I respond has caused me plenty of grief. As a child, people would scare or antagonize me until I lost control, then make me look like the bad guy. I have gotten a good handle on it as an adult, but it is not easy. It is mostly verbal now. I rarely look like the better person when I start yelling in the heat of the moment, even if I am right. That is why I try to put distance between myself and others when I feel harsh words coming and my gut starting to boil. Story 70. My gut reaction is to fight every time. I had to learn to flee conflict because I would take a bad situation and make it 1,000 times worse. Story 71. Run now and retaliate when they do not expect it. Let enough time pass and people will forget I had a motive. Story 72. Flight first. Assess the threat later. Get to higher ground. Story 73. Talk them down and de-escalate. If that is not possible, decide who is at risk. If someone else is at risk, can I walk them away before it starts? If not, can I send them away before it starts? If the answer to all of the above is no, start it myself before they get a chance to. Story 74. Fight when I know I can win. Flee when I know I cannot. Story 75. I am an unusual case because I was born with a flight reflex, but after training in the United States Marine Corps, I developed a fight reflex. I do not know how deep these reflexes go, but apparently in some cases they can be rewired. It has not shaped my life because I have never faced a genuine threat. The closest thing I experienced was being attacked by 2 dogs before joining the United States Marine Corps. I ran then, and now if I am startled by a dog, I square up. Story 76. I would mostly choose to fight, but in some situations I would try to avoid fighting. Overall, I am a confrontational person. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.